Stories can be told in a near infinite number of ways. They can be on a page, a large screen, and even in the shared consciousness of a group of friends. If you're watching this video, you likely want to try crossing mediums, or at least interested in hearing about how. I'll do my best to help. This video is primarily focused on converting short stories to a tabletop role-playing game format. If you don't know what a tabletop role-playing game is, or a TTRPG for short, don't worry, I'll explain soon. Novels and other storytelling mediums may or may not receive a focus in the future, though a lot of the advice here can apply to them as well. Now let's start the process of turning your short story into a tabletop RPG by laying some groundwork. Let's quickly define what a tabletop role-playing game is. Bear in mind that this is a very broad definition. It likely will not apply to every game, but most of them. Tabletop role-playing games are interactive group activities involving role-playing, exploration, and combat. Players take on the role of a character of their choice and go on the adventures guided by a game master, sometimes referred to as a dungeon master, sometimes referred to by another name. Much of the game is improvisatory and is tailored to the interests of a specific group. The adventure is built around the players at the table. Famous examples include Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, and hundreds more. In the context of what you'll be doing, we'll convert your story to a one-shot. You might be wondering what a one-shot is too. Essentially, a one-shot is a tabletop RPG adventure intended to start and end in a single play session. They often, or even usually, become 2 or 3-offs, but the general intent is for a fairly short, self-contained story, which makes short stories the natural medium to adapt to a tabletop RPG one-shot format. That being said, you might be wondering why you would want to do this in the first place. Sure, you might like writing and maybe even like tabletop RPGs, but why would you want to combine them? Well, they provide very different experiences, some of which I'll go over in a moment, but the inherent kind of draw to this conversion factor is working with friends as a bonding activity while having some fresh eyes on your storytelling abilities. The improvisational nature of tabletop RPGs can also help you think on the spot and find new ways of viewing your stories. Writing is oftentimes a group activity, even if you conduct it on your own, and a tabletop RPG format is, in its own way, a collaborative writing process, and it can reveal a lot about what you want to write, and how you can even enhance the way you tell your stories. Let's go over some comparisons between prose writing and RPG writing. These can help you reframe your work before you start. Prose writing allows you to paint more internal pictures of characters and have stronger individual control over your narrative. You don't have to worry about players maybe impacting your story if you're writing on your own. RPG writing, by contrast, involves much more improvising and usually, though not always, requires a focus on body language and dialogue to convey internal thoughts and feelings as opposed to internal monologuing like you can do in a prose work. Perhaps most importantly, tabletop RPGs are collaborative. Your players can add to your story, and they can even come up with different interpretations of the same events. So, you know what a tabletop RPG game is. You know how to contrast, the differences between it and your short story. So, how eligible is your story for this conversion factor? For this conversion process? Well, all stories are eligible to become a tabletop RPG adventure. Sure, some stories are easier to convert than others, but this can apply to pretty much anything you can write. The best thing to start with is to look at the system you're using, more on that in a moment, but generally adventures have options for combat, puzzle solving, exploration, role-playing, and roles. These kind of form the pillars of adventures. And they also serve as good building blocks for when you're writing your own. If your story has opportunities for a fight, for players to spread out, or even a meaningful conversation that suits the tabletop RPG format, that's great. Your story is definitely eligible. Even if it doesn't have any of these factors that kind of suit the format, you can reframe how you approach the issue. Player interactivity and role-playing go before all else, so you should prioritize those. Now, I mentioned in the beginning that there are hundreds, if not more, tabletop role-playing game systems. There's such an array of options, how do you choose one? There's no easy answer, but the best way is to experiment. The first thing you want to do is find games that match your story's genre. Is your piece medieval/high fantasy? Might it be science fiction, horror, or maybe something even relatively mundane? There are countless systems fitting each of these realms of storytelling. and the best thing to do is to read about and play them until you find your favorite. There's also the option of creating a system of your own, which can be a fun experience in and of itself. This video mostly operates under the assumption that you're using a pre-existing game, though. Now that you have an idea established and a system picked out, what might you want to do next? This obviously depends on the system of your choice, so I have to be a little bit broad about things. Generally speaking, it's good to look at some adventure supplements for your game of choice. Taking D&D as an example, there are official adventures and fan-made ones on sites like Dungeon Masters Guild, DriveThruRPG, and so on. Get a feel for the structure of most of these adventures and what they demand, though of course you can always make creative deviations to the norm. Most of these systems also have templates that you can find online. Some are free, others are cheap. They're generally not going to be more than $5. They're by no means necessary, but they could help you get a feel for things and how you want to write your adventures and stylize them. Now that you have a feel of how your gamer of choice's adventures work, we can look at the conversion process itself. Generally speaking, it's best to give players room for what we might want to call the 3 building blocks or the 3 pillars of role-playing games: exploration, combat, and role-playing / social interaction. And these kind of fit together in various kind of subsystems, but those are the 3 things you want to focus on right here. Come up with some interesting dilemmas that relate to your story, its characters, and its world. A good rule of thumb is to break down the challenges, conflicts faced by your characters into these 3 types. Some might relate to combat, some might relate to social or role-playing activities like conversation, interpersonary disputes, and some might even involve some exploration. You can tinker with expanding how much of each the adventure entails. Your adventure might honestly involve just dialogue, or it could be primarily combat or action focused. It's really up to you what you write and what your story kind of suits best. Some other things you might want to consider is, will your players play as characters within your story's world, or within your story's events? Will they play as the characters you have written, or will they play as original characters within the world you've created through your short story? Will they interact with your characters in their story if they aren't playing as them, or even, again, play as those characters? It's very important to think about, do you want them to embody the characters you have written, or interact with them, or even just exist in separate spaces entirely? And how do you intend to maintain the themes of your piece and convey them through an interactive role-playing manner with all of these other factors included? There's no clear answer to any of these questions, but it's best just to go by ear and kind of see what suits you best. Remember, this is a process of experimentation. You're probably not going to get it 100% right the first time. With all this said, there are a few other things worth bearing in mind as you experiment with the conversion process. The story of your one-shot will almost definitely deviate from your short story, and that's totally okay. It's even a good thing, as I mentioned in one of the previous slides. You can learn more about your writing on a pseudo-instinctual level by allowing players to do what they want and responding accordingly. If your original story has a lot of twists, it might be a good idea to keep it away from players until they go through the adventure. Metagaming, which is role-playing based on information a player knows that their character doesn't or shouldn't, can often be subconscious. This doesn't mean you should bar someone who's read the story, though. Just be careful with telling people too much in advance, or you might even want to wait for them to read the original story until after they play the adventure. Lastly, as I said before, expect to go through many, many adventures before you truly get a grasp on how things work and what you like most. Like I said about deciding a system, experimentation is key, especially in such an individualistic, self-led context. Now, with this all in mind, I hope you have the inspiration to craft a story of your own, or if you already have a story crafted, convert it into a tabletop role-playing game format. I think there's a lot you can gain by just having players engage with your story on a deeper instinctual level. And I hope you have a great time with it. Thank you.